when we are composing music for TV shows, movies, and commercials, we need to keep this sort of overlying theme always present in our heads, which is less is more. I made a mistake early in my career thinking much more is more. So I was literally stacking my tracks with tons of extra drums and extra leads and extra synths and extra sound effects and just some of my sessions back then, you should have seen them. They were absolutely disgusting how noisy they were. And my mistake, and the reason why I was doing that, is because I was assuming that if I just had more stuff in my track would feel bigger and more impressive and maybe even louder. And it's actually the opposite. In fact, you kind of want to go with the least amount of instruments and elements in your track while still maintaining the emotion, mood, genre that you're really going for. Okay, so in this video, I'm going to give you 5 tips to ensure that you are following this less is more philosophy, and why they're actually going to result in you having stronger tracks that are not only going to highly, or increase your odds of getting accepted by libraries, but of course also increase your odds of getting placements, which is the ultimate goal. Okay, number 1, you guys know that this is like my sort of top 10 commandments number 1 rule: use reference tracks. Okay, so if you're not doing this when you're creating music, especially if you're new to this business, you should be finding a library you want to work with, looking at their catalog and finding music in your particular genre and pulling up the track. You're not going to be able to download it, so don't even try. Almost any library will not let you download it, but it doesn't mean you can't keep it up on your web browser on another window, and you can look at the WAV file and you can listen to it. And what you should be listening for is how many elements do they have in their track. So let's say you're doing a minimal orchestral like tension piece. Okay, so you have been putting 20 elements, 20 different instruments in your tracks, and you listen to some of theirs and they have 4 instruments. Really, they might have a little drum sample, they might have a bass, some strings, and maybe a piano. So they have 4 things, but with those 4 instruments, they can actually create a 2-minute long piece of music that keeps you on the edge of your seat and completely delivers a whole range of emotions and has full dynamics and feels like an amazing ride to go on, and is very clear in its emotion. Okay, so you should first be using those reference tracks to go, well, if they can achieve this with 4 instruments, all right, maybe I don't need 20. Maybe I could try to challenge myself to do just 4. And whatever genre you're looking for, the same thing can apply. So don't try to go this alone. Don't try to reinvent the wheel. I say this all the time, and I'm saying that because it's what I needed to hear early on in my career. Just follow along with what's already worked, and you can basically study from the greats in this business by listening to their music, taking notes on what they're doing in their track, and trying to emulate that in your own. Okay. Number 2, try to let every instrument that you have in your track have a very particular place and purpose. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Well, if you're going to be including a piano, okay, what is the purpose of this piano? Is it a supporting instrument that's going to support like a lead on top? Is it the lead itself? Is it the sort of the focus point that's kind of in the mid to high range frequency range, so we could be focusing on that? Is it the rhythm? Is it maybe more of like a percussive beat, or maybe like a pulsing bass synth? Is that really kind of providing the rhythm of the track? Is it just ear candy, meaning you might have some little elements that kind of come in, sprinkle in here and there, that just add a little bit of tension or a little bit of whatever to keep the track moving forward and add some forward momentum to the track? That's great. And maybe if it's an ear candy piece, it doesn't need to be focused. It can be panned off center, panned off to the right or the left, right? So it can kind of tell you, based if you know what the purpose of it is, where it can kind of be in the track, right? Maybe some elements you want to throw in are just to build up tension, right? Like a reverse piano swell or a reverse guitar or a white noise riser. That's just to be building tension. Or you want to release, so you have a crash or an impact or a bass drop, right? So you should be knowing when you're putting something in your track, you should be able to articulate it clearly and say, what is this here for? Is this providing support? Is this providing a melodic lead? Is this providing rhythm? What is this doing? The mistake that I made in my career is I would have a good chord progression with some great drums, and then I'd put a lead. And so things were kind of moving, but then my brain would tell me, that's not big enough, you need more. So I'd start throwing other lead instruments and sounds on top of all this, that I thought, well, if I just have a couple of other things, it'll just feel like this big cacophony of just amazing, beautiful music, and it'll all just sing together. And it never did. It just literally sounded like everybody was trying to compete and talk over each other, and it sounded noisy, and I couldn't hear any melody anymore. Now in retrospect, I can see all that. At the time, I really couldn't. So just make sure that every instrument has a place and a purpose, and it's there to actually serve that place or purpose, okay? Number three, don't ever have two or more lead instruments competing on top of each other. So I hear this a lot as I give reviews to people in pro feedback. They'll have a guitar and a piano, both in the lead frequency range, and they're both playing different melodies trying to compete for my attention. Even if they try to, well, I pan this one off and this one off over here. To me and to most listeners, it's going to sound like two different people trying to talk to you at the same time. You've ever been in a dinner party and two people are trying to get your attention? It's like brain freeze. Like I can't do this. It's going to malfunction me, right? And that's what we feel when we hear music, where there's too much stuff kind of coming at us all at once and all trying to get our attention. So always have one lead, one instrument, which you can stack up. If it's a guitar lead, you could stack a synth lead on top of it, mimicking it, doing exactly what it's doing. So you can create sort of this artificial sound that's made up of different elements, but it should all be singing basically the same melody. If you are going to have two different melodies in one section, go for the call and response. That's basically the way to keep it nice and clean. Piano lead, guitar lead, piano lead, guitar lead. Let us take a break from each of them so that the other one can come in and do the response or do the call. So just make sure you have some separation there with your leads, okay? Number four, this is also a really big one with the tracks that I've been reviewing at Pro Feedback. Try not to over compress everything. So I have some producers that have amazing music, amazing tracks, great, awesome musical ideas, and it sounds like the whole thing got squeezed through a tube of toothpaste, and there's literally no dynamics or really emotion left in the track. Everything feels just like it's squashed and compressed and pushed down, and I can't feel anything because there's no impact left in the track. Everything feels like it's cranked up to 10, and therefore there's no dynamics to the track at all. So I know that the modern approach to producing and mixing music is usually to overcompress, to make things louder and louder and louder. I understand we are living in this sort of contest to make our tracks super loud. So some of that we can't really control. We do need to sort of use some compression and try to get our tracks loud. But don't get it to the point where you've lost the natural dynamics of your instruments, of your drums, of your impacts, of your strings, of all that kind of stuff. It's okay for things to not be cranked up to 10 the entire time through. Try to do this less is more approach. Like, let the track have some relaxation to it at certain points so that when that big chorus comes in, boom, we can really feel the energy of this track really hyped up a little bit more. And it's going to get our emotions more tied into it, which means the supervisor, the editor who needs that emotion for this placement can easily find a reason to put your track in there. Okay, so that's a really important thing. And then last one is try to get used to and get in the habit of, when you're producing, not just hold your fingers down on your keyboard and be like, okay, there's my lead, but really go back over it. If it's like a string lead or something like that, use your modulation wheel, get into some automation, really make those things come to life. Because what you'll find is if you can have one string beautifully orchestrated, beautifully arranged, and with some modulation to it, just acting as if it were a live performer, which has those natural dynamics within its notes, you'll find that one string lead can actually provide 10 times the amount of emotion and attention and forward momentum that you want than adding a whole bunch of extra stuff that you're just heavy-handed on your keyboard and just throwing it into your track. So always know that when you're putting something in your track, can it afford to have some extra dynamics within itself, like by using your modulation wheel and having it grow from a piano soft level to a forte loud level, even within one note. You can definitely sort of listen to a lot of music and whatever you're producing and see how these people are doing it. This is very particular and also very specific for orchestral trailer music, so and minimal and any sort of orchestral music. Definitely, it's like a must. You really have to do this. But you can also do this with synths. You can also do this with guitars. You can do this with a lot of different instruments. So try not to be sort of the lazy producer by just, okay, there's a string lead, done. Go back over and think about, how can I make this part sing a little bit more within itself without having to add more to it, without feeling like I have to just stack stuff up to make the track bigger. But how can I make this one element that I put in my track the best that it can possibly be? And when you do that time after time, you'll find that you won't actually have to stack up your track with a whole bunch of extra stuff that really didn't need to be there, because the original idea is just going to sing much better. Okay, so anyways, those are my top tips for you guys. I hope you guys do follow these and make sure that you are using this less is more approach, because I think you'll find it'll be probably actually a lot less work, and you'll find that you can finish tracks a lot quicker when you have this mentality sort of built in from the startup.